Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Missouri Association for College Admission Counseling panels. We are so excited to have you all participating in this event today. Thank you so much for joining us. We have some fantastic schools and presenters with us today. My name is Matt. I'll be your facilitator. Before we get started, I'm just going to go through a few housekeeping announcements for our attendees. Your camera and your microphone are off, so the panelists cannot see or hear you. You can use the Q&A button on your screen to type your questions to our presenters at any time. This is just one of many different sessions happening, so be sure to check the schedule on the website. And this presentation is being recorded and will be available at strivescan.com/Missouri. And without any further ado, I'd like to turn it over to our presenters.
Thank you, Matt. We're going to do some quick introductions here, and then we will get started. So I will introduce myself as I'm David Rice. I'm from St. Louis University, and with us tonight is also Hannah Smith from St. Louis University. We'll be covering some more in-depth financial aid pieces, but right now I'm going to turn it over to Michelle.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dave, Hannah, and Matt. So welcome to our financial aid and scholarship session. My name is Michelle Arashi. I am the college and career coordinator and counselor at Pattonville High School, which is a large public high school in the St. Louis metropolitan area. And it's my pleasure to share some scholarship information with you this evening. As I share my screen, I have also placed a link to the presentation in the chat. So you can open this at a later point and go through the material. We will not have time this evening to go through every single slide. So I wanted to make sure that you have that slide deck. So I'm going to go ahead, assuming that you all can see my screen, which is Scholarships 101. Maybe Dave or Hannah, you can give me a thumbs up if we are good to go. And we'll keep moving forward. Thank you. So again, this is going to be a very quick overview of scholarships, but you can go back into the details at a later point. I will be covering some of the types of scholarships, which basically are broken down into college sponsored and local and regional scholarships. The requirements, some tips, and then lastly are My Scholarship Central. My Scholarship Central is a St. Louis-based organization that manages a number of business and nonprofit scholarships. Definitely check out their website. They do have scholarships that are available for students across Missouri and even some into Southern Illinois. So I would definitely check out their website. Again, I am not an expert on My Scholarship Central, so I'm going to refer you to the slides for that portion. So college-sponsored scholarships, how do you find those? High school counselors are definitely, you should make those some of your best friends if you are a senior. And really senior year is when you're going to be applying for scholarships. But if you are an underclassman, especially a junior, that's a great time to start looking and researching scholarships so that you are ready to apply as a senior in the fall. Number one source of money for students is the college itself. So you really want to ask yourself, where can you leverage your qualities, your academic, your athletic, your music qualities? Where can you leverage those with a college to get the most money? And then also when you're on the college's website, most of them have done a fantastic job of centralizing all of their scholarships onto one page, and you can search from that page. So, excuse me, I skipped a slide. So there are different types of college-sponsored scholarships. What you're probably most familiar with would be academic or merit, and these are based on your academics. The criteria can vary, and so it's very important when you are looking at a college that you read all the fine print. In particular, in the world now of test optional, meaning that an ACT or SAT may not be required, it's important students to ask the college, how does a test impact my scholarship eligibility? It may be a different answer than your admission, so definitely ask that detail. And you see some other questions that you can ask. My students oftentimes come to me and ask, me to point them to the national scholarship that will rain down money from the sky. The reality is the college is the best source of scholarship. And the way that you leverage that is you look at what qualities you have to offer, GPA, ACT, and look for colleges, as you see in the pro tip, where you will be among the top 25% of the applicants for that college. So that's going to vary by student. But if you are targeting colleges where you're going to be that top student, they're going to be providing scholarships for you. That's how you find the big scholarships. Same thing, again, if you are a top academic student or maybe have significant leadership experience, you can look for scholarships of the competitive nature. These oftentimes have names such as presidential or provost scholarship, and that's where you'll find the big dollar amounts. There are typically additional steps for you to complete as well, application, interview, and they are limited. So this is not a guarantee like a merit scholarship. There are always early deadlines, and that is another way that you can maximize your scholarships is to apply early. We're seeing November 1 and December 1 be very common deadlines for scholarships. Also keep in mind that you may have to be admitted to the institution before you can apply for certain scholarships. So it's very important as a senior that you are ready to start applying in August and September so that you have time to meet scholarship deadlines. I had a student a couple of years ago who really leveraged his GPA and ACT. He could have applied to, Ivy League schools, but he decided to aim for schools where he would be that top 15%. And he landed a full ride scholarship. And now he works for Boeing. So I think he's doing pretty good. He has no debt, but he really was strategic in how he used his GPA and ACT. Some other areas for college-sponsored scholarships would be in the categories that you see here, perhaps based on ethnicity, a first-generation student, maybe you are a male going into nursing or a female going into engineering. You may find that there are scholarships at the college for these particular types of students. Missouri A+. Strong supporter for A+. And so if your high school is an A+ high school, I would strongly encourage you to complete the requirements for A+. A year and a half ago, nobody knew about COVID, and that really threw the class of 20. And many of them chose to, at the last minute, go to the community college, stay home, stay safe, and use A+. So it's always good to have A+ as an option for yourself. Athletic scholarships. We could probably spend 2 hours talking about athletic scholarships and how those work. If I said just briefly, they are very limited. And oftentimes athletes come and talk to me and they put a lot of effort into getting an athletic scholarship, when the reality is there's far more money on the academic side than there is in the athletic side. So it's very important also that athletes be realistic and have a realistic appraisal from a coach as to what type of scholarship, what amount they can actually realistically expect. Most are not full rides anymore, but if it can be a partial amount of money, all money is green and all money is good. So if you can leverage athletics and academics, that's a great way to build your portfolio of scholarships. So in the fall, I strongly encourage students to focus on the college, as I just shared. How do I find college scholarships and leverage that money? In the springtime, often, then you're shifting your focus to more of a community-based scholarship. And in particular, your local and state community. And I have listed several here, several resources here on the slide, because it depends on, again, you and your community and what's available. But I am a mother of a college freshman, so I went through this process last year with my son, And I can tell you for a fact that he has a nice nest egg from the local and community-based scholarships because he applied, and many students don't apply. It does take time. It does take organization because your local scholarships have different requirements, different deadlines, different ways they require you to submit the scholarship, whether it's email or postal mail. So you have to be very organized, students. But if you start stringing together $500, $1,000, trust me, it starts to add up, and you can find yourself with $10,000, $15,000 to use towards college. Keep in mind that's usually just a one-year scholarship award, so you still have to figure out how will I pay for the other years of college. But again, all money is helpful. So I do encourage you to check in with each of these resources, especially your high school counselor, and start making a list of scholarships in your local community that you can apply for. Sorry, I think I'm having some, we're having thunderstorms here in St. Louis, and so the internet is a little sketchy. Okay, national scholarships. These are very competitive. And so don't encourage students to spend a whole lot of time Google searching random scholarships, unless you can put yourself into a smaller group. And what I mean by that is if you are part of an ethnic minority, if you are a first generation, if you have a disability, if you are a female going into STEM, then you may find a national scholarship that you can apply for and have a reasonable chance of receiving. I would not waste my time on scholarships that are no essay, no letters, no GPA. That, my friends, is a lottery, and that is not worth your time. So you're going to have a much better chance of receiving a scholarship when you can compete in a small pool of students, or smaller pool of students at least. The requirements, applications will vary. And so it's really important, students and family members, to read the directions and follow the directions. Because that can be one way that a scholarship organization will eliminate your application simply if you did not follow the directions. Highly recommend the spreadsheet to keep track of all of your scholarships and the various pieces that will go into them. So this sort of becomes your job if you are a senior. It is a way that parents can help many times with some of the database, or some of the spreadsheet tracking, running to the post office and buying the stamps and, addressing the envelopes. Those are some things that maybe parents can help with while the student is filling out the application and writing the essay and so forth. But it will vary in terms of what you are required to submit. It's also a good idea to save copies of everything, because you will find, students, you can recycle. You can recycle that essay or that short answer statement, your resume. And so that will save you some time as you continue to apply in the spring. Sorry, once again, having some technical, there we go, pro tips. So, and just sort of wrapping up, because I want to make sure there's plenty of time for Dave and Hannah to talk about financial aid. So to wrap up, some pro tips from the world of scholarships. Never, 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 never pay to apply for scholarships. That, my friends, is a scam. So don't pay anyone to help you find money. Your school counselor, that's why they're at school. They can help you. Again, community organizations, My Scholarship Central, and the college are all great sources for scholarships that you do not have to pay for. Question 2, 3, 4, 5, these are all questions, 6, that you would want to ask the college or the community organization so that you understand how this money will be awarded. Will you get it for 1 year or 4 years? Can you stack an academic scholarship on top of a music scholarship, on top of a leadership scholarship? And so that you're, building your scholarship portfolio. So these are, again, just some good questions to ask. As they say, the devil's in the details, and that is true for scholarships. It's important that you know those details. And number 6, as we transition into financial aid, it's very important to students and families that you know what your family can afford each year, so that you come to this process with a set amount that you know in your mind, this is what our family can afford, whether that's $0 a year, $5,000 a year, $20,000 a year, or whatever your budget allows. You have to know what you're coming to the table with before you start falling in love with colleges that are outside of your budget. So if you know what your budget is in your family, and then you can start looking at scholarships where you can maximize your GPA and your qualities. And then again, Dave, in a moment, we'll talk about financial aid from a government standpoint. If you can combine those different pots of money, that's the way most students afford college now, is to have a portfolio of resources. So make sure that you're looking at the long-term plan. You want to be able to graduate college, so you're looking at 2 or 4 years minimum, and how will you pay for all of those years? So the rest of my slides I'm not going to go into because it is for My Scholarship Central. But again, you have this access to this slide deck. You can certainly Google My Scholarship Central. It's a wonderful resource to find additional scholarships sponsored throughout the state of Missouri. So without further ado, I am going to transition to Dave and Hannah, who will speak to you about financial aid. If you have questions, I'll keep an eye on the Q&A and try to answer those privately.
Thank you, Michelle. Great information. We're gonna move through these slides also pretty quick to leave you guys plenty of time. This is a general presentation, and many times when we're doing it, it would overlap a lot with the things that Michelle just talked about, but we will leave some of that out. But still, we're gonna talk about what is financial aid, when and how do we apply, different types of federal aid, what is an award letter. It's good to always have a plan to pay for a degree, like Michelle was talking about there at the end, and what is the financial aid timeline. Just some of the goals of financial aid. We want to reward you all. You've been working hard in and outside of the classroom, so financial aid will reward those student achievements. That we all know that there are finite budgets in place these days, so evaluating a family's ability to pay is important, and distributing limited resources in an equitable manner. And also providing a balance of gift aid and self-help aid. Gift aid would be the grants and scholarships that don't have to be repaid. Self-help aid are going to be loans and work study programs. Anytime this whole financial aid thing gets to moving too fast, just remember this slide. This is what makes up financial aid, these 4 things. Scholarships are the merit-based pieces of aid that come from things like your ACT, GPA, sports, music, theater, different talents that you have. Grants are the need-based pieces of aid that come from the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. That is the cornerstone of the need-based grants. Loans, we'll talk about 3 different loan programs tonight. We'll talk about federal student loans, federal parent loans, and private student loans. And then work study, federal work study or employment opportunities. And know this, if you happen to not receive a federal work study award from schools, you can still work on campus. Many times they're the same jobs, same rate of pay. Just a little easier to get a federal work study job because that comes from a different budget source. So how and when do we apply? First, just by applying to admissions. Many of the scholarships that Michelle was just talking about, things that come from your GPA or your ACT score, are initiated just by your admission application. We'll talk more about the FAFSA in just a second, but that's the free application for federal student aid. That's the federal Pell Grant application. That generates federal aid eligibility for Pell Grants, SEOG grants for your federal student loans. I also do like to mention CSS profile because I agree 1000% with Michelle. Don't ever pay for a scholarship. But CSS Profile is an application that's used by about 400 schools around the country. It isn't free. It's $25 for the first school and $16 for every school after that. It's an application that schools use to take a deeper dive into our family finances to see how they're going to award their own scholarship money, but it's not a scam. It's legit. It's put out by College Board. So if you see that, it's a legitimate application. St. Louis University doesn't use it for our domestic students, but we offer it for our international students so they as well can have access to some need-based types of aid. Just a few quick screen prints here of the new federal website. It's a couple years old now, but the Department of Ed has transitioned all of their sites into one. They used to have a separate site for FAFSA, separate site for student loans and different things, but they've transitioned everything to studentaid.gov. So just a couple screen prints of this. The application tab there is where you'll go to apply for FAFSA here in just a couple weeks now. And it's also where you'll go to apply for loans and complete master promissory notes and entrance counseling and some things like that. Lots and lots of great information out on the site, from all the way for planning for college into how do I repay, how do we repay our loans. And yes, of course, it can be downloaded on your phone, and so they have a mobile app that's available. So talking about FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, the federal Pell Grant application that will become available October 1st. If you are seniors and you're going out there to complete the FAFSA October 1st, you want to make sure you select the 2022-2023 FAFSA, because the 21-22 FAFSA will also still be available out there for students who are still completing that for the current year that we're in right now. So 22-23 is what you want to complete. Many types of aid are made available on a first come, first served basis. So you want to complete that as close to October 1st as you can, and you will have to complete it each year. When you're completing the FAFSA, one of the things families are concerned about the most is what do we do with our tax information? So we would recommend, if you at all possible, that you would use the IRS data retrieval tool. When you're in the FAFSA, you'll come to the point where they're asking you for your tax information. And it's as simple as just clicking a button. It'll have an IRS tab there. You click a button, it takes you out to the IRS, and you can download your tax information right into the FAFSA, puts everything in the right place, pulls the right information, puts it in the right space. It also verifies that that information is correct later on when schools are looking at that information. So if at all possible, would recommend that you use the IRS data retrieval tool. Things that you can do now, as we think about completing a FAFSA, you will need what's called an FSA ID in order to sign it. You'll need one as a student, and parents will also need an FSA ID. It is just a username and a password that you will create. You want to keep that someplace safe, because you can use that each year when you're completing FAFSAs or signing loan applications. So put that someplace safe. There are FAFSA practice tools out there that you can go out and utilize right now if you're concerned about the FAFSA, but I would put your mind at ease. The FAFSA itself is not hard. You will have no problem doing that. Just main thing is to make sure you have your FSA IDs before you start trying to complete the FAFSA, and that you put those someplace safe. One of the things you can use is the net price calculators. Every school is required to have a net price calculator within a couple clicks of their home page. We hear a lot these days about the high price of college, and to be sure, those prices can get up there. But what we hear in the press are the sticker prices. But that's not what you're going to pay. All that, the information that Michelle was sharing for you, private four-year universities right now are averaging somewhere between 50 and 60% discounts. Public schools maybe not quite as much, but their prices are a little bit less already. So you can go to any school that you want to look at and get a sense of what you might actually pay to go to that school, not just the sticker price. There's a lot of jargon in financial aid, and we won't get lost in that tonight, but I want to share just two terms with you, just so you've heard them and have a sense of them. The first is EFC, expected family contribution. It is the result from the FAFSA. You'll put all your information in, and it will give you a EFC number that can range from 0 to 999,000. Federal Pell Grant range is an EFC from 0 to a little over 5,700. This past year, a 0 EFC gave eligibility for a full Pell Grant of $6,495 for the year. And on a sliding scale of $100 increments, that goes down to a Pell Grant of right around $1,000 for an EFC of around $5,700. So that's the first thing that the EFC does. It's also fed to our state. And state grants, they range around $2,000, and the EFC cutoff for that was around $12,000 this past year. And then it's also fed to the schools, and schools use that number to determine their own need-based scholarships that they're going to award to students. So EFC, just a good term to be familiar with. The second one is cost of attendance. Cost of attendance determines the maximum amount of financial aid that you can receive at any school, and it's made up of these components. First, the direct costs, made up of the tuition fees, room and board if you live on campus, but it's also made up of what we could just call some cost of living factors, things like transportation. There's a miscellaneous category to give you some room to buy soap and stuff like that when you're in school. There's a loan fee. The federal loans have fees associated with them. And then books and supplies. And you might think, well, why are books and supplies not considered direct bill costs? Many times the bookstore is not necessarily part of the school. Like for instance, St. Louis University, Barnes and Noble is right there on our campus, but they're a separate business from the school. Or many times, I know for my own kids, we used Amazon to buy books many times. The registrar's office will have an official list of books so that you're safe to go out there and buy those books from Amazon if you want. Obviously, you can buy them from the bookstore if they have one of those on campus as well. But just again, good term to be familiar with. We talk about need-based aid, and don't get lost in all of these details, but it's good to see this calculation. We determine need-based aid eligibility for a student. It works like this. Let's imagine that column 1 there is 4-year private schools, maybe the most expensive schools. Column 2 are 4-year public schools, a little less expensive, and column 3, community college, is the least expensive option. First, we see that expected family contribution is the same at all those schools. It's a federal calculation. It's not different at different schools. So the calculation we see here is cost of attendance minus EFC equals need. And that determines need for things like subsidized federal loans, where the government will pay the interest on the loan for you while you're in school, or eligibility for federal work study, or other need-based aid programs that the school may be offering. So again, don't get lost in those details, but just kind of good to have a sense of how that calculation is done. Different types of federal aid. We talked about the Pell Grants a minute ago. Pell Grants are portable. Once you know what your EFC number is and know if you're eligible for a Pell Grant, you can shop that grant at any school that you're looking at. But these other pieces on here begin to get into the types of funds where we talked about being first come, first serve. Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant can be worth as much as $4,000, but it is an allotment of funds that the schools receive from the federal government, and we run out of it really fast. At St. Louis University, we can't even get out of the 0 EFCs, and we will be out of these funds. So you want to apply, again, as close to October 1st as you can. Many times these days, priority deadlines for aid applications and different types of aid is February 1st, but with FAFSA moving back to October, even that date tends to get earlier each year. Federal work study works a little different than every other type of aid. Grants, scholarships, and loans will all post to your account first. If there's money left over after that, that'll be refunded to you. But federal work study, first you'll have to secure a job on campus. Most schools use a location on their website to tell you what jobs are available and give you the applications for those jobs, but you'll have to apply and get a job on campus. And then those that they'll usually work about 10 to 15 hours a week, but that pay will then come directly to you as you earn it. Whether you have a balance or not, it'll pay directly to you. You can use that to pay back toward a balance if you want or need to, but it can also be just used for your spending money. All right, let's talk about 3 different loan programs. This is the federal student loan program. We see 2 columns on here, the direct subsidized loan and the direct unsubsidized loan. As a first-year student, you can borrow a maximum of $5,500 for your federal student loan. It's not a credit qualifying program, but at each grade level, the government's going to tell us, the Department of Ed's going to tell us how much we can borrow. The subsidy is that the government will pay the interest on the loan for you. So of the $5,500, as much as $3,500 can be subsidized, and then the other $2,000 would be unsubsidized. Remember that calculation I just showed you, cost of attendance minus EFC equals need. As long as that calculation shows a number greater than $3,500, you could get the full $3,500 as a subsidized loan. As we look at different years, we can see that that goes up by about $1,000 a year. So $5,500 the first year, $6,500 second year, $7,500 year 3 and 4. The loans this year have a fixed rate of 3.73%. That's the rate on that loan for the life of the loan. They set a new rate each year. And student loans repayment can be deferred while you're in school. It's not just graduation that triggers repayment, though. It's when you drop below half time for more than 6 months. So full time is 12 hours. So if you drop below 6 hours for more than 6 months, that loan would go in repayment. If you go back to school, it can be deferred, repayment can be deferred again, but would be deferred until 6 months after you're out of school. You know, we used to not have to talk too much about anything except that first year loan amount. But nowadays you all earn a lot of college credit in high school. So actually that grade level 1 is 0 to 29 hours. If you take more than 29 hours into college, let's say you have 30 or more hours, you actually would qualify for that grade level 2 loan amount. The independent amounts you see there are, most of you will fill out a FAFSA and be dependent, needing to use your parents' information. But if you happen to fill out a FAFSA and do qualify as an independent student, those are the other amounts that you would qualify for. These are the other 2 loan programs. The column in the middle there is the federal parent loan program. The column on the right is the private student loan program. These now we can borrow up to cost of attendance. So we can cover not just those direct costs, but we can cover those cost of living expenses to our books, or later in future years, if we're living off campus, we can generate money to cover the rent for our apartments and things. The main difference between these loans, the federal parent loan has a fixed rate of 6.28% this year. The private loans are typically variable interest rate loans. The federal parent loan has a federal origination fee of 4.228%. The private loans do not have an origination fee. The private student loan, again, like the federal student loans, is repayment on that is deferred until 6 months after students are out of school. The parent loan can be deferred until 6 months after students are out of school. It's as simple as checking a box on the application, but otherwise federal parent loans go into repayment 60 days after they're fully dispersed. So half will come in August for the fall, half in January for the spring, and they would go into repayment about February or March of your spring semester. We're going to talk about some loans, and Michelle did a great job of having you start thinking about how to pay for a degree. If we're going to borrow some money, it's important to kind of understand how much that is in repayment. So for your federal student loans at an interest rate of 3.73% this year, the loans we're talking about have standard repayment terms of 10 years. So for every $10,000 you borrow, that would be about $100 a month. So for instance, if over your 4-year degree program, if you borrowed $25,000, your monthly payment would be about $250 a month for 10 years after you got out of school. Salary ranges, if I usually take home a little bit less than 6% of your annual salary a month. So at $30,000, you're taking home $1,800 a month, 40, 2,400, you know, you can continue to do that math, but that'll help you understand if the loans are affordable or not, as Michelle talked about having a good plan to find out what schools are affordable and work for your budget. If your parents borrow some loans, for every $10,000 they borrow, that's going to be about $112 a month at the current interest rate of 6.28%. If you're going to borrow the private student loans, well, there are variable rates, and we live in some really good interest rate times. We usually calculate those at 10%. They may be less than that right now, but at 10%, they're about $132 a month per 10,000 borrowed. They'll just give you kind of a point of reference. If I'm going to borrow some money, what's that look like in repayment? Award notices, you know, at this point, you're kind of doing your applications for admissions. Pretty soon, it's going to be time to start applying for the scholarships that Michelle was talking about, your FAFSA. Usually between November and March, you'll start receiving official award notices from the schools that you've applied to and been accepted to. Probably more in January, February, and March. But when you get them, they can make sure that when you're looking at them, you let them slow down. Remember, there's just 4 types of financial aid: grants, scholarships, loans, and work study. So let's imagine you've gotten 2 award letters, and the first award letter says that they're going to give you $60,000, and we're pretty excited about that award letter. The second award letter says they're only going to give you $30,000. But as we look a little closer at the first award letter, of the $60,000, $45,000 of that was a credit qualifying parent loan. And so it's not that we won't qualify for it, but that's not grants and scholarships. It's money that we'll have to repay. As we look at school, the second one, we noticed that of the $30,000, $25,000 of that were grants and scholarships, and $5,000 of that was a federal student loan. So actually, the second award letter, though it looks much less, is actually a much better award letter. So utilize your high school counselors to help you understand those award notices. Utilize your admission counselor, your financial aid counselors. If you're having any trouble understanding them, they should be very clearly defined as these are the grants and scholarships, these are the loans, and these are the work opportunities. But if that you have any hard time understanding those, definitely have that conversation with your high school counselor. All right, just a couple more slides and we'll stop and take questions here. No matter, this is just kind of bringing everything all together. So let's imagine we're gonna try to figure out if this school is affordable for us. And no matter what school you're looking at, it's gonna work like this. We're gonna have costs, those tuition and fees, those direct costs, those on-campus costs. We're gonna have aid, and for right now, we'll call aid those grants and scholarships. Maybe we'll need to use our student loan. Maybe we've received some of those outside scholarships. So cost minus aid. If that ends up with a zero balance, that's great. We don't have to think about anything else. But if cost minus aid and there's still a remaining balance, sometimes it seems like we're not going to understand what to do, or there must be 1,000 different ways to cover that, but there's really not. There's just 3 ways to cover that remaining balance. Really, it's like anything in life. If we go to buy a car tonight, we can either pay cash or we're going to have to pay that off over time. So the first option, if we have a remaining balance, are payment plans. Most schools will split that balance up into 5 payments per semester. So fall semester, August through December, and spring semester, January through May. So you can divide that balance by 10. If that payment plan doesn't work, we can look at doing a federal parent loan. And we know that, as what we looked at before, if we borrow for every $10,000 we borrow, that's going to be about $112 a month for a standard term of 10 years. Or we can defer that remaining balance until after we're out of school, and we can do a private student loan. And we know that that's going to be about $132 a month for $10,000 borrowed. Okay, so that's just a way to understand. It's going to vary by family. It's going to vary by our budget. There's not a right or wrong answer, but it is an answer you want to have figured out before you move into the dorm. Okay, have that figured out to know what's going to work for your family. Best financial plan for all of us is to complete our degree in 4 years. And that sounds really easy, but most students don't complete it until 5 years. So most degree plans are 120 credit hours, and we know in 4 years, there's 2 semesters each year. So we've got 8 semesters. So we need to average about 15 credit hours per semester. A lot of times it's the same price for 12 to 18 credit hours. So sometimes it's say, well, we're just going to get off to a good start. We're just going to take 12 hours. You take 12 hours twice, you're going to buy a 5th year. And some students will say, well, I'll make that up in the summer. But summer's not scholarship and it's not free. And if you don't live in that town, housing is expensive then too. So we want to average 15 hours a semester. Just the timeline, August through December, you're doing all your admission applications, if at all possible. And I know these are some crazy days and times. If at all possible, you want to actually visit the colleges you're most interested in. October 1st, by then you're going to create your FSA IDs, so you're all ready to do your FAFSA. October 1st, then you can file your FAFSA. And if you do it October 1st or right there early October, you will not miss any cutoff deadlines or miss out on any scholarships. The later you wait, though, the more you're in danger of missing out on some things. November through March, you'll start receiving those award letters. May 1 is your day. If you pay some deposits to schools to hold your space in class, May 1 is the national date to kind of get those deposits back. So that's when you kind of have to make your decision. This is the school we're going to. May through August, that's when you will be doing your orientation. June's a big orientation month. You'll be registering for class, meeting your roommates, visiting that college. And before you know it, it's August and it's time to move in. Most of the bills will go out in July. Usually first payments are due in August 1st. All right. I am going to stop sharing and open it up to see if we have any questions. And it's been the keeper of our questions. Any questions, Hannah, that we need to go through?
We don't have any open ones right now in the Q&A, but maybe if you want to kind of go over how the FAFSA is tied to each academic year and talk about how aid might change throughout their time in school.
Good question. You will fill out the FAFSA each year. That EFC number can change from year to year. The things that usually remain constant for you as you try to think of your plan to pay for a degree, those scholarships that Michelle talked about, the outside scholarships, the private scholarships, they usually are only good for 1 year. So we still want them and they can make a big difference. But the main scholarships you're depending on for your degree are the ones that come directly from the school. And those are usually renewable for the 4 years that you're going to be there. They'll say this award is renewable for 8 consecutive full-time semesters, and it comes with a renewal GPA of 3.0 or whatever the criteria the school sets for that scholarship. So those are the ones you're going to kind of make your cornerstone as your financial aid package. You're going to kind of build your plan around, and that you're going to count on. We will think in terms of cost at most schools going up somewhere between 2, 3, 4% a year. So as you, again, make your spreadsheet, here's year one, my cost minus my aid, here's my remaining balance. How's that going to change over the 4 years? Your federal loan's going to go up $1,000 each year and help offset some of that cost. But you want to understand how that gap is going to either remain the same or change over those 4 years. Any thoughts, Michelle, on those things?
No, I ditto. I'm just 100%. I think we're preaching to the choir. We're on the same page here, but I noticed we have a few questions that have come in related to financial aid, so I'm going to save time for that.
Okay. All right.
Okay, a question about, I think Missouri Most savings plans and how that factors into assets that you have to report on the FAFSA.
Yes, you do have to report the 529 plans on the FAFSA. But you know what? Wow, bird in hand is worth it though. The fact that you've got that money saved. Most of the time, if we start talking 529 plans and things, a lot of times we're out of federal Pell Grant ranges and things like that. And those funds come in very handy. So some people say, so when should we spend those? Should we, like, for each student, we divide them by 4 and spread them out evenly? They'll hurt you on the FAFSA. So I would say if you have them, utilize those funds before loan funds if you can, to defer needing to borrow. But yes, they will go on the FAFSA.
And then do they need any special tax ID or anything like that to do the IRS data retrieval tool? It'll just pull in directly from the IRS, correct?
Right. Just when you're in the FAFSA, you will have already put in your FSA ID number, and that FSA ID is tied to your social security number. So the FAFSA knows who you are when it goes out to the IRS to download that information. So it knows who you are at that point.
Okay, and then the only other one that I see now is criteria for US citizens on the FAFSA. So is it just US citizens, permanent residents?
US citizens and eligible non-US citizens, and man, that could probably be a whole seminar in and of itself. So if you were an eligible non-US citizen, you should be able to supply an alien registration number or something. And if you apply and are an eligible non-US citizen, most of the time schools will be required to collect documentation of your citizenship status. And the school will work with you on that. I would say this too, for DACA students, most schools have a process for that. And that's something you'll want to start out working with your admission counselor, but let them know and work closely with your admission counselor in your financial aid office.
Okay, and I just see one more. So family income limit to qualify for grants. So typically what's an EFC that's going to be good for qualifying for need-based aid?
Great question. And it'll vary from school to school, but the first things that EFC we talked about, 0 to about 5,700 puts you in federal Pell Grant range. 12,000 and under puts you in state grant range. It's going to vary widely from then. When we look at schools at St. Louis University, depending on your merit scholarship, we can get up in the $30,000 and $40,000 EFC ranges and still be putting need-based grants on the table. But that will vary widely from school to school. And there's another reason to go out and check out those net price calculators, because they can give you they're not perfect at all, but they can give you a sense of what that might be.
And I'm going to jump in here if we have just a minute more. There are some institutions that if you are a low income, high achieving student, very high achieving student, and a low income student, there are there's a handful of colleges out there that will look at that and could possibly pay all of your cost of attending. Washington University is the one in Missouri that can do that. but they have a threshold. It's on their website. If your family earns below a certain income level and you are, able to get into WashU, then you may have the opportunity to go for free. Again, if you're a very high achieving and a low income student. Some other Missouri institutions such as Mizzou, again, if you are Pell Grant eligible, so a low income family, some of the state public institutions have stepped forward to cover all tuition and fees, not room and board, but tuition and fees. So again, if you're a low-income family, you may want to talk with the admissions or financial aid office of the university to determine if there are some need-based programs you can tap into as well.
All right, so that is all the time we have today. I want to thank everyone for joining us, our panelists. Thank you so much for sharing this great information. For our attendees, when you close out of the window, there will be a quick 5-question survey. If you wouldn't mind filling that out, we'd really appreciate it. That's how we make improvements on our events. So if you wouldn't mind filling that out, that'd be great. A reminder to sign up for more sessions. We do have some coming up later today and the rest of the week, so you can check those out. And this session was recorded and will be available at strivescan.com/Missouri. Again, strivescan.com/Missouri. I want to thank everyone again and have a great night.